The recording has stopped.
मैं सभी को सादर नमस्कार कर रहा हूं और मैम का हार्दिक स्वागत करता हूं। आज हमारा 8 पहले हो चुके हैं, हम लोगों के 8 एपिसोड हो चुके हैं और 9वां हमारा ये एपिसोड है। पिछले एपिसोड में हम लोगों ने उड़ीसा के जो मंदिर हैं बहुत ही अच्छे भव्य तरीके से उसके दर्शन भी किए, उसका सूक्ष्म ज्ञान प्राप्त किया। आज हम बंगाल और आसाम के मंदिरों के भी संदर्भ में जानेंगे। मुझे लगता है कि जो बांग्लादेश में भी चला गया है पोर्शन, उसके भी कुछ मंदिर का भी हम लोगों को ज्ञान प्राप्त होगा, जहाँ पर जाना बहुत ही दुर्लभ है। तो इस तरह से ऐसे दुर्लभ जो हमारी व्याख्यान माला का हमको जो पुण्य मिला है, उसके लिए मैं इनके प्रति हम लोग सभी के प्रति, अपने जितने भी पार्टिसिपेंट हैं सभी की ओर से उनका हार्दिक अभिनंदन करते हैं। साथ ही इसके जो प्रायोजक हैं उनका भी हम हार्दिक अभिनंदन करते हैं। श्री राजकुमार जी ओसवाल, श्री निर्मल भोगीलाल जी मुंबई, श्री धनेश जी के का परिवार एवं श्री मातुश्री राजकुमारी जी के परिवार के प्रति भी हार्दिक अभिनंदन और उनका स्वागत करते हैं और मैम से निवेदन करते हैं ज्ञान सरल शब्दों में कराएं।
Definitely. Okay. Right. Namaste, everybody. Welcome. So today, yes, we are going to learn about temples of Bengal and Assam, right? Actually, very little has been written and taught about the temples of these two states. I don't know, somehow they have always been, kept away from, like there are these huge volumes of encyclopedia where each and every temple has been described across India, but somehow I think by the time they were able to include these two states, somehow the project got, dissolved or something like that. So we rarely get to learn about the, typical temples of Bengal and Assam. Okay. So I just thought we definitely want to dedicate one lecture to these two very, very beautiful states of India. So we'll start with Bengal, of course, first. So the entire story of the cultural evolution of Bengal is very, very faithfully represented by the growth and development of its temple architecture, I would say that. And the history of temples of Bengal will reveal that in the midst of the cultural conflicts, and there were so many successive invasions by the outsiders, and the local people were much oppressed. But throughout when all this was happening, its spark of culture was never kind of blown out, I would say. It was because Bengal maintained its spirit of assimilation, comprehension, and also the synthesis, and yet maintaining a remarkable continuity, I would say, of its own traditions, right? So in spite of North Indian architectural influences, Bengal produced something very, very new and distinctly original, which we will see in their architectural style, and which kind of extended to the neighboring states also. Some of the Assamese temples we see are very much influenced by Bengal temples, and not only within India, but outside India also, Burma, Siam, what we know as Thailand today, Java, Cambodia, Nepal, etc. It proves that the past supremacy and the grandeur of Bengal temples was such. Okay. And also another reason that we don't have such extensive history of Bengal temples is due to the acute paucity or not availability, I would say, or shortage of ancient structural remains. It's a difficult task then to reconstruct an accurate account of the early temple types of Bengal. In fact, whatever that we talk about now is through the literary references, stone images, and the illustrated manuscripts that, where ancient architecture or different types are described or are shown in relief or drawings. They give us a clue to depict as to what kind of earlier architectural experiments were happening in Bengal. Okay. So with this short introduction, we will now visit some of the ancient temples of Bengal. And yeah, okay. So there are many different types of temples that we come across in Bengal. And erstwhile Bengal, now of course we call it West Bengal, because East Bengal has been taken by another. I mean, it has been renamed as Bangladesh, and it's a different part of it's not part of our country anyway. So first kind we will talk about are the Bhadra types, or the tiered type, or the Pidha type. Now, if you recall, I spoke about the Pidha Deols when we spoke about Odishan temples, no? The Jagmohan, the Mandap always had that Pidha Deol, the tiered, the superstructure like this, like the Pidhas, the small stools on which we sit. So in a receding order, they are arranged like this. So they are called the Pidhas, or the tiered, or the pyramidal. All right. So they consist of these horizontal, tiers, right, kind of, which gradually, they are diminishing as they move upwards, with kind of small recesses in between each story, and finally capped by an Amlaka. Here you can see on top, Amlakshila first at the base, Amlaka, and Kalash, right, on a narrow cylindrical neck. You can see that. So this is the Ekteshwar temple I'm trying to show you. And this is a very, 1872 image this is, all right. But the temple, of course, is much older. And this is in the Bankura district of Bengal. In fact, Bankura, Birbhum, Bardhaman, these are some of the areas where we get a lot of ancient Bengali temples, all right. And in fact, the Nandi pavilion in this temple is the only extent when I say is still present in situ, okay. Structural temple of this type. Here it is composed of, you can see the three gradually decreasing, receding tiers resting upon square pillars. And in fact, the moldings here, you can see the moldings of the Adhishtan here. Do you see these very bold moldings of the basement, and very fine? And it is built of laterite, the stone which was present, and has sandstone and brick additions of later date. Okay, so this type of pyramidal superstructure composed of tiers and covered by an Amlaka Shila is represented on a relic of Gupta period also from Sarnath in Nalanda. Then on a lintel in Khajuraho temple also we have seen, and other parts of central India. So we know that these kind of temples were already in existence that time. Yeah. Then the second type of temples that we get are the Rekha Deol. We have already seen these temples very clearly when we looked at the Odishan temples. So Rekha Deol with a very lofty, gradually diminishing, curvy linear like this, shikhar over the high square garbhagriha, surmounted again by Amlaka and Kalash, or both. So Bengal Rekha Deols are slightly different from the Odishan types, whereby it is not followed by the Jagmohan. Normally in all the Odishan temples, we saw there was an adjoining mandap, which was called the Jagmohan, all right, along with the curvilinear shikhar or the ta. So the cultural influence of Orissa was not only limited to temple architecture alone. In fact, the ancestors of the present-day Utkal Brahmins started settling in the southwest of Bengal, right, with grants of rent-free lands, either from the local kings and chiefs or from their Orисsan overlords. In fact, right from the 10th century, and the process continued till almost recent times. Okay. So this is the Barakar. Barakar is a small town in Asansol in the Bardhaman district in West Bengal. A group of temples are believed to have been built in the 10th and 11th centuries there by the Pala kings. So there are these different dynasties. We will be talking about Pal kings, Sena kings, Malla kings, Malech, etc., etc. We'll talk about. So these are locally known as the Begunia temples. So a group on the account of the very shape of this particular, temple. If you look at this, it almost resembles the fruit of the eggplant or the bangan. So begun is something in Bengali, the eggplant is called. All right. So there are these group of 4 temples in the compound, and all 4 of them are located together, protected by a big boundary wall. Okay. So this is somehow the boundary of the temple that I'm trying to show you, and these are the 4 temples here. Okay. So this group of 4 temples, out of which 2 consists of simple cells. So here you can clearly see there is no Jagmohan here. The temple is just Garbhagriha and there is a shikhar on top. So that kind of completes the entire temple structure. But you definitely have a Shukanasi here, the protrusion on the front side, right, which kind of protrudes from this side. And this is the entrance. Okay. So, of course, this also is, of course, there are some traces of mandap that you can see very, probably in a very, tentative state, I would say that. But you can see that the shikhar is very, richly indented. There are many offsets that you can see. And it's the finest example of this Rekha Deol, in fact. So an inscription is there in one of the temples, written in Proto-Bengali, which mentions the name of the Raja Harishchandra as the builder of the temples. The earlier one is datable to 15th century. That's what it is called. In fact, many stone idols have been discovered in the complex. Some are Vishnu idols, but others are Jain idols also, possibly belonging to the older 4th temple, all right, which is a Jain temple in the same complex. Okay. So plenty of evidences were found in this complex that goes to prove that Barakar was once a very big Jain religious center. Okay. And stylistically, the temples and the sculptures provide evidence of the cultural and technological intercourse the local artisans, the sculptors, the architects had with Bengal, heartland, in fact, comprising northern Radha, Varendra, and Vanga. Vanga means, the nearby area. Okay. On the one hand, and of course, with Orissa on the other. So we will see Orissa, Bengal, Assam. There are many common features that we will encounter in the temples that we see. So while the majority of the sculptures found from Purulia, Bankura, and other, some portions of Bardhaman, they bear, stylistic resemblance to those of the Pal Sen period. A number of, Nagar Shikhars temples remind one of Orissan temples also of that age. This is another Rekha Deol. I'll just show you one type of temple, then we will go on to the another one. So Deoliya, this is a brick temple, shows the features of a Nagar style. You can see that very clearly. Rekha Deol, the ground plan is Pancharatha. There are 5 offsets, which you can clearly make out from here. 1, 2, and this is the Karnaratha, right? So 5 offsets on each side of the Garbhagriha wall. The ground plan, this is the ground plan that I'm trying to show you, surmounted by curvilinear shikhar or tar. The temple has stucco work also. Stucco is plastered over carved bricks. And in fact, Jain sculptures are found at the place may indicate that it belonged to the Jain faith, and the temple is datable to 10th and 11th century. So this kind of appropriation, where the structure belonged to one faith, and then the later on, a new idol was installed, and then totally the worship and the practice in that temple changes. This has been a very, very recurring phenomenon we find. In fact, it's not only true in India. I think across globe, whenever there is a more prevalent or more powerful sect, they will always try to appropriate all the structures, existing structure, and try to install their own deities, or even if it is, non-idol worship, say in Islam. Or so, I mean, we have seen this constant tussle between different faiths. Babri Masjid le lo, Kashi Vishwanath temple. I mean, the battles are endless, and I don't think we should even get into all this, because this has actually very little to do with the faith or the belief in the supernatural power or the God. These are all very, very politically motivated, I would say, actions. Yeah. So we as art history students, I think we need to purely look at these things from that point of view. Yeah. Okay, so then now this is the Siddheshwara Shiva temple at Bahulara. Is very, very well known for its unique architecture and exquisite cut brick and lime stucco ornamentation on the walls. Of course, now here you cannot much see, but look at this. Now doesn't this remind you of an Orisen temple, the bandhana, three bands of bandhana, which kind of joins the Upari Janga and the Tala Janga. So this is the Janga part, right? And this is how it is, being joined together, right? Okay. In fact, it is one of the oldest, of its type, with shikhar of Nagar style, and very, very tall, very high shikhar, almost 19 to 20 meters of, at present it is. Possibly it was built sometime approximately around between 8th and 11th century, as maybe it was originally a Jain or a Buddhist shrine, and later on got reconsecrated, which I just mentioned, or I would say appropriated by another faith, and as a Shaivite monument, and by the Malla monarchs of Bishnupur. So So you can see typical Orisen temple features in this temple. So other than the central, Shiva Lingam, the Garbhagriha has figurines of Ganesh, the Jain Tirthankar Parshvanath, and of Mahishasura-mardini. You can see these sculptures that I'm showing you. So looking at the very idol of Parshvanath here, again, it kind of points to probably originally it was dedicated to Jain Tirthankar. Okay. And the exterior of the temple is covered with very, very magnificent stucco ornamentation. Stucco, everybody understands, I hope, the POP, ornamentation, which actually it's very easy to carve because it's softer than stone. So you can make very, very intricate and involved sculptures and ornamentation on the wall. Okay. In fact, there are many, ancient relics and old mounds which have been present in the, area, which kind of tells you the extensive nature and long history of this particular place here that we are talking about. Another temple, same kind of temple, the Rekha Deol, Ichai Ghosh at Gaurangpur. So it is, of course, a late medieval brick-built temple. We have seen the earliest brick-built temple I showed you was at Bhitargaon, Kanpur, from Gupta temple, when we did early Gupta temples. And of course, the brick temples are very popular in Bengal because of the locally available material. All right. And this is again of the Shikhar Rekha Deol without any image. In fact, the tradition says that Ichai Ghosh constructed the temple in honor of the goddess Bhagavati. All right. So probably she was the deity who was installed earlier. So the temple, of course, has some ornamentation, but not much. Okay. Then these are, of course, the two ancient temples joined together, the twin temples in Suri district, Birbhum. The two brick-built temples with square bases probably had domed top. Here, you can see here. This is one picture I'm trying to show you. In their original shape, in their facades are, of course, of carved bricks. The main temple faces east and the small north. So here you can see in the ground plan, you can clearly make out this is the big temple. Here it is facing this side, and this is the northern side, the smaller temple. And both are connected with a kind of a tunnel or a passage or a vestibule inside. All right. Datable to middle of 16th century, which is 1550 CE. In fact, the larger temple has an inscription also over its doorway. So these twin temples, but combination of a Bhadra and a Chala type, having a domical roof. So now I've just used a new term, Chala. So I will explain to you what it means. So another pair of temples at Surul Birbhum of later date. These are, of course, the Bhadra types, surmounted with multiple Kalash and Stupi at the top. Here you can see Kalash, Amlaka at the base, and the Stupi here. And this is, of course, this is that, in fact, looking at this structure, it is not a curvilinear shikhar, nor is it a pidha. So here we clearly see a lot of Islamic influence, Indo-Saracenic architecture, you can see. Look at the arch here, right? So originally, of course, it is the door and lintel kind of architecture. Do you see this? The jambs and the lintel here. But the main entrance here, it is in arcuate. This is not a trabeate pattern, all right? So this is a typical Islamic arch that we are looking at here. And this globe, this bulbous dome also, again, is a very typical, I would say, Islamic architecture influence that we are looking at. Then this is ground plan of Rudreshwar temple, okay, Bardhaman district. So this is a Shiva temple and built with laterite. You can see the platform or the Jagati is made of stone laterite, and it is a rectangular structure, and its facades, of course, are broken into 7 rathas. So when you have these many, offsets, then naturally it almost looks like a star-like pattern when there are many offsets on all the 3 walls. Okay. In fact, due to repairs that have been undertaken in different periods, its original features are somewhat lost or obliterated, and its date of construction or erection is also not known very well. Of course, it follows a typical northern style Nagar temple, where there is a marked distinction between the porch here. You can see an extended Mukha Mandap here and the entrance. Yeah, it is not just one building that we saw in earlier temples. I can show you again. Yeah. So it's just, so there is no distinction. No, the Garbhagriha itself, there is no, even no pretense of having any kind of an entrance porch. Whereas now here you can see there is some distinction here. So you can say this is, of course, the Mukha Mandap, that new feature we are seeing, but again, an arched doorway we can see here for the entrance here. So we have seen, especially in earlier temples, Gupta temples and other temples also, there are these door jambs and lintel, all right, almost a rectangular assembly that we have seen, unlike all the entrances that we are encountering here, which are kind of in an arch shape. Okay. Okay. So we can see from the plan here, there is a Shivalinga which is installed inside. Okay. And other than that, we don't find much of the sculptural detail here. Then this is another type of Bengal temple, which is called the Chala style. Chala style is nothing but it imitates kind of a triangular roofs of rural Bengal huts. Yeah. The stone temple, which is built over a platform here. This is a huge platform which is there. A hut-shaped roof you can see here. And it has, again, 3 arched entrances here. All the 3 are in an arcuate fashion. Datable to 14th century. And here again, you can see a lot of Indo-Saracenic influence looking at the arched doorways. And when we look at the plan, you can clearly see these are the 3 entrances here. Yeah. And this is the high platform. You can climb to this with the help of this staircase. And there is a narrow vestibule or an antaral whereby you can reach the inner chamber here. Okay. So looking at this plan, you can clearly see how thick the walls are inside. Yeah. All the black portion is the solid wall that we will, okay. Then another, this type, which again is the Chala type only because of the hut kind of superstructure. Jor Bangla temple is a leading example of this particular style. Here the twin triangular roofs are further accentuated by another roof on top, which is called the Char Chala. Char Chala means that instead of one roof on top, there were 4 roofs like this, right, on top. So Char Chala. And if it would be called Art Chala if there were, total of 8 roofs on top. Okay. So Jor Bangla, the very name itself suggests the style of the temple. Jor means 2 and or twin, and Bangla refers to the common, this roof style of Bengal, the hut type. The roofs are shaped like, of course, the thatched roofs of the huts, right, in the rural area that we encounter today also. So in fact, there are, you can see in this image also, there are extensive carvings on the ceiling, exterior, interior walls of the temple. Carvings here are most prominently, they depict the Krishna Leela, the very name of the temple, Krishna Roy's, so Jor Bangla. So Krishna Leela, apart from the, fauna, flora, and human life. There are a lot of mythological animals that you get to see on this temple carvings. It is also known as the Kesatrai temple and was built in the middle of 17th century by the then king Raghunath Singh. This is one of the most famous temples in this region, standing apart from the others because of its typical roof design, right? Then Nanur is a very, very small town in the central region of West Bengal. It's also the birthplace of 14th century lyric poet Chandidas. You may have heard of him, the Vaishnavite saint. I mean, he's written a lot of Vaishnav Padavali. Okay. Padavali means the verses. Pada means verses. Okay. And Avli means the rose. Okay, Padavali. So there are several temples built in the 17th, 18th centuries. Besides a mound which was popularly known as the Chandidas Bhitta in this area, some of these temples have exquisite terracotta sculptures also. So these are also again the twin kind of temples that we see here. And you can clearly see the hut kind of superstructure here. And these are all brick temples. You can see the lot of ornamentation on the outer walls. Then a group of 12 temples are, made in different kinds of styles at Kalna in traditional Bengal Chala style and Ratna style. So now we are also introducing a new term here. These are called the Ratnas. These bulbous domical things, almost imitating the minarets of the Islamic architecture. So they are called the Ratnas. So these are of course, the sloping roofs, the hut kind of roofs. Yeah. And these are called the Ratnas. So depending upon how many of these, minaret kind of things are there, accordingly, the temple is named accordingly. Okay. So these are, of course, made by in the 19th century, early 19th century, I would say, by the king of Bardhaman, located at a spot known as Rajbari compound. And there are many temples inside the compound, as you can see from this map: Bijoy Baidyanath, Giri Govardhan, Gopalji, Lalji, Jaleshwara, etc., etc. Many temples are there. Then, of course, the very popular, the Char Bangla temples at Baranagar. So these 4 temples enclosing a small courtyard were built by Rani Bhavani of Nator. Each temple has 3 arched openings, as we can see here. Yeah, very clearly, all the 3 openings we can see. And they have 3 Shivlingas also, very richly decorated. Their facades, in fact, illustrate the best ornamental brickwork that we have seen in Bengal. The Eastern temple is ornamented with, delicate plaster work also. The decorative themes which vary are drawn mainly from the Hindu epics and, of course, the Puranas also. So probably we can see now here we can see very, very clearly. Now, do you see? Look at this. Probably I have a detail of this. So what this is the battle between Ram and Ravan. You can see the 10-headed Ravan here. So most of these epic stories are being sculpted on these walls. And as I said, terracotta being a softer material, the detailing of the sculpture is, very, very easy to bring out. Okay. So these are all Ek Bangla temples with triple entrances. And in fact, the northern temple, so out of 4, the northern one is dated to 1760. And 2 of the temples have very, very rich terracotta facades. One has a plaster, and the 4th one is, of course, plain. And it says that, there are no other example of these Ek Bangla is found in West Bengal, except just for few here and there. So this is one place where you can find this particular kind of temple. So according, in fact, the list of monuments of national importance, the Char Bangla group of 4 Shiva Mandirs are, in fact, ASI listed monuments. Okay. So another design I want you to pay attention to are these, the spearheads, edges. So which is this fringe that you can see almost, coming up like this. So जिसको हम हिंदी में कंगूरे बोलते हैं ना, sometimes, the scalping also, sometimes on the cloth, on textiles also, we will make these, sharp fringes. So this is again a very typical feature of the Islamic architecture. You will find on, not only Mughal, but even in the Sultanate period, in fact, it started, right? And some of the buildings, if you see of Sultanate period, you will find this particular decoration there. Okay. So, of course, the exquisite terracotta carvings on the facade is very, very evident here. And the trident here on top, or the Trishul, attests to the fact that it is a Shiva temple. So here you can see the white stucco work very, very clearly, right? Yeah, look at this. And it is kind of intermixing with the brickwork also here. So it's kind of giving that play of red and white, what we encounter in some of the Islamic monuments of later date. Of course, Taj Mahal, we will find this. Humayun's tomb also, we find this play of course, marble is very little used in Humayun's tomb. But yeah, you can see that interplay of red and white. So that's what we can see here also. So here, unlike the earlier temple, this one, here the roof is kind of more or less symmetrical, unlike the Ekchala temple in the complex, which have one side is kind of truncated in that temple. They like this one. Okay. Of course, built on a high platform or Jagati or Pishta, as is known as in Orison temples. In architectural. Now here you can see very clearly the intricate carving on the outer walls. Some of the carvings I thought for you all to enjoy. So there is this huge wealth of terracotta sculptural panels, the Mahishasura-mardini, multi-armed, holding various weapons, slaying the demon Mahisha, who's shown in a human form here. All right, sometimes we see him in anthropomorphic form, half, Mahisha, or the male buffalo. That's what Mahisha is. Who's otherwise, but this again is a very typical feature where the mount of the Devi, the lion, is always pouncing upon the Mahishasur from behind. Okay. In fact, the other niches are also holding all kinds of other divinities. And here, this typical arch here, I want you to notice here. This is the, engrailed arches that which actually came in Islamic buildings much later. In fact, none of the Sultanate buildings have this kind of engrailed arches, where, one arch is kind of disrupted by many smaller arches. They are called the engrailed arches. Okay. In fact, if you go visit Rajasthan, there is a lot of these. In fact, all the Havelis or the palaces, the forts also, you will find these kind of engrailed arches at the entrances. Okay. There are some more terracotta panels for you to enjoy. Here you can see a narrative panel, of course, and there is a processional frieze that you can see here at the bottom with foot soldiers or the infantry holding all kinds of weapons in their hands, and they're kind of moving in a file, in a row, in a very, very ordered function way. Here you can see everyday scenes and probably some mythological stories also, which are being depicted here. Then this is another type, single, towered ratha. We didn't see any kind of superstructure earlier. So here so now if you look at this design here, I've spoken about it earlier also. This is called the Marlo design, or Kapi Shirsha. I showed you this design in my last lecture on the Mukteshwara temple, the boundary wall, the Kapi Shirsha, this portion. Okay. So it has one shikhar in the center made of bricks. So Madan Mohan temple was built by the Malla king, Durjan Singh, in late 17th or almost last decade of 17th century, 1694. And it is relatively a bigger Ek Ratna temple. Now I'm using another new term, Ratna. Ratna are these, these kind of minaret kind of, superstructure, or the minor shikhars that we have on top. Okay. Ek Ratna temple means just one thing is there on top, compared to other similar temples in Bishnupur, and is very, very important also. That it's a square temple and, almost has a height of 10 meters above a moderate platform that you have here, made of stone, whereas the structure is made of bricks here. Okay. So the roof of the temple is, of course, typical, Bengali chala type, the rural hut type that I have been talking about, surmounted by the single shikhar or tower. The temple is mainly built of earthen bricks on a laterite platform here. Okay. There are, in fact, covered porches on all the three sides. All right. And there are mythological stories from like Krishna Leela, etc., which are depicted on the temple wall. In fact, around the innermost sanctuary where the idol is kept, there are, covered porches also on all the three sides, except the rear wall. On each of these three sides, there are these three arched entrances that you can see, openings, the main entrance being on the west. So Madan Mohan temple is probably the most famous because of the interesting story which involves the deity which is there inside. So it is said that the original deity was installed in a village in Bengal. And the fame of the deity, in fact, spread far and wide after the personal visit of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We all know the famous Vaishnavite saint, poet. And so the Malla king, in fact, carried the idol to his capital at Vishnupur and installed the deity in this particular terracotta temple built for that purpose. So the legend also says that the deity Madan Mohan himself protected or defended the Malla king in the battle with the Marathas, Maratha invaders, when they attacked in Bengal in 1820. So the original temple, of course, was destructed due to the massive earthquake. And after that, the present temple was rebuilt. Okay. Then this is Shamrai temple at Bishnupur. Again, a brick temple, 5-towered. You can see 4 in 4 cardinal directions and 1 in the center. So Pancharatna temple, a Ratha temple, which is Pancharatna. In the next stage, in fact, 4 additional miniature towers in addition to the main central tower will be added to other temples, which we will see. So this is the ground plan. So this is the ground floor where you have these 4 entrances here, the Sarvot Bhadra having 4 entrances here, and having these 4 Ratnas. So this is the plan of the upper level, right? Where in the 4 corners we have these 4 shikhars or the minor shringas, and this is in the center, the main Ratna. So these are the structures which are called as the Ratna. And depending upon the number of these, accordingly the temple is named Pancharatna, Panchvinsh Ratna, which that also we will see. So here we are seeing some inscriptions here. So the script is, of course, Proto-Bengali and dedicatory inscription that we find on the southern facade of the temple. And when we are looking at these sculptures here, we can clearly make out that it is, we are seeing the, love play of Radha and Krishna here. And so we can easily make out the dedication to Krishna, the temple is. Then this is the very beautiful Ras Mandal plaque that we have, terracotta plaque on the wall, south facade of the Shamrai temple. So I think the Ras, the playing of Ras is very unique to Indian thought. So here we have a panel depicting a double-story temple. So I have repeatedly, I have mentioned this, that sometimes the very architecture of the temple is also used as a decorative motif. We have seen that right from Gupta temples. We've seen that in Rajasthan temples, Khajuraho temples, etc., etc. And Odisha temples also. We saw those Pida Mundis, Vajra Mundis, Khakra Mundis. No, they are, what are these? They are those miniature temples, no, which are kind of capping the niches on the walls. So here, similarly, it's almost serving as a Jal Vatayana, this particular, it's kind of a window which is used for letting in light and air. But look at the shape. Just, last I showed you in in Parshurameshwar temple, those dancers and musicians were there, no, in that Jal Vatayan. So it was not any kind of mesh design, but those dancers in those Parswastik, pose, etc., they were actually juxtaposed in such a way that, of course, aesthetically, they were very, very appealing. At the same time, there was kind of a, there were gaps in between so that light and air could pass. So similarly, you can see that happening here. This is, of course, the famous, again, I would say, the episode of Ram and Ramayana. So this thought of, defeating evil or the victory of good over evil is very, very intrinsic to Indian thought or Indian philosophy. And in fact, Indian art, in fact, has a lot of, basis, lot of sculptures and decorations, and the philosophy is based on this, right? And most of the decorations that we find on temple walls will always show this. In fact, Krishna slaying all different kinds of demons, then Shiva getting rid of Andhakasur, or different Vishnu, demolishing Madhu and Ketab, etc. So this is actually across, all the different sects of Hinduism, I would say, whether it is Vaishnavite, Shaivite, or Shakta, whatever. But this thought is always a constant, I would say, denominator. Huh? Okay, so this is the east facade of the temple. All right, so this is the next temple that we are going to look at, the Kantanagar temple in Dinajpur district. This is a unique example of the temple architecture. In fact, Maharaj Prannath and his adopted son, the renowned zamindars of Dinajpur, erected this temple in very early 18th century, around 1700. I would say first quarter of 18th century, I would say that. And just by looking at the facade, you can see how, intricately the carvings are there. Again, this feature almost remains constant, where we have the laterite or the stone, platform or jagati here. Not very, very high, unlike the Khajuraho temples we saw earlier. So again, in fact, in Orissa temples, we saw this kind of a platform was almost missing, other than the Raja Rani temple. And then, of course, in Konark temple, of course, the platform was very, very high. But the earlier temples, Mukteshwar, Parshurameshwar, etc., there was really no platform over there. So this is somewhere in between. And you can see the intricate carving that is there here, right? And here the Marlow design has kind of little bit, has got stylized here, I would say that. So it opens up almost like a lotus petal here, right? Not really like what you have on the fort walls. Yeah. So this is, of course, the southern view of the Kantaji temple, which was shot in 1871. And it clearly shows 9 spires. So 4 on each side, then other 4 are on the next level up, and then the middle one on the 3rd level. All right. So, of course, that was subsequently destroyed, and in an earthquake, it was a very devastating earthquake, and many buildings, and there was a lot of, commotion that happened during that earthquake. So here you can see, of course, all these shikhars or the towers have been demolished all side, but the foundation, in fact, the bases of these towers are still present, which is kind of a testament to their presence in the earlier times. Okay, so 9-towered or Navratna temple, as we call it, Navratna Ratha temple in this variety, where you have a duplicate of the main shrine down, almost present on the upper level here, all right, with the central main tower here. So almost this is what we are getting here, is a replica of the structure which is below. So also the size of these corner shikhars or the towers kind of diminish in size as they go upwards. So the tallest will be the bottom ones, and then they will diminish. But of course, the central one will always be the biggest. Okay. So this is a square 3-story brick temple that we are looking at. Okay. This is the detail of the same temple. So here you can very clearly see the decoration, the arches, the Islamic influences coming across very, very clearly here. And look at the deity. I think I have a detail of this. Yeah. Okay. So Radha Krishna sculpture inside the temple here. So the Krishna cult was very, very popular in Bengal at this time. Of course, and the Shakta cult, these were the most popular. So these are the terracotta pillars and decoration of the facade. Here you can see. And each niche has some kind of a divinity or some sculpture or dancers or musicians or some mythological figure you will find here. Look at this here. another detail here you can see. Terracotta decorative panels showing the episode of probably Ashwamedh here, the horse being driven in the center. So, of course, there was a lot of maritime trade, right? And here you can see a huge boat which is depicted here with people rowing, and the king or probably the merchant who's seated. I don't think this is a king because he's, his crown, etc., does not indicate that. So probably he's some kind of a trader who's kind of traveling in this boat, which is shown here. Okay, sitting on a seat, smoking a hookah here. And the entire surface of the temple, in fact, is exquisitely carved like this, embellished with terracotta plaques like this. And depicting different flora, fauna, geometric motifs, mythological scenes from Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and of course the contemporary social scenes also. Then there are other kind of miscellaneous temples, but this one temple definitely I want to discuss about is the Ras Manch of Vishnupur, Bankura, outside the fort. Is a peculiar architectural type and is very different from all the rest. Okay, so the Ras Manch made of bricks has a square chamber and which is surrounded on each side by 3 galleries. So if you start from the core of the temple inside, there are 3 galleries, right? And each gallery has different number of these archways, starting, from the first innermost has 5, then has 8, and then the outer one this outer one has 10 archways. And these are all capped by these chalas or the hut kind of designs. And the corner one, of course, is the char chala. And these are the, do chala designs on the other side. And the entire thing, of course, is capped by this pyramidal roof here. Okay, so this is a unique structure built by Bir Hambir in 1600 CE. And inside the structure, of course, one can circumambulate all the 3 galleries which are present inside. And there is also a white limestone coating here. You can see probably earlier the entire structure was seen in white color like this. All right. But of course, it gives an impression that the structure must have been white earlier rather than red. Okay. So there is a festival, Ras festival, which was meant for fairs and for celebrating these kind of festivals in this temple. And in fact, it hosts an annual fair called the Ras festival, where apparently people used to come here from neighboring areas with their village deities, idols they would bring for the Ras here and, festival. And they would display them in the galleries of the Ras Mandal, inside Ras Manch rather. The 3 galleries I spoke about. Okay. Then this is, of course, the Anand Bhairavi temple in Sukharia, Hooghly. Is a 3-storied temple, but it has 25 of these pinnacles or the shikhars, Panchvinshati as we call it. All right. And very, very richly, in fact, otherwise it's quite stark, but these panels are very richly ornamented here. But it is more famously known for these multiple, these shikhars that is present on top. Built in the early 19th century, around 1810 or something like that. So in fact, there are, I'll show you some later probably. So these different Ratna types, I showed you this particular temple has 25 of those. In fact, there are many different. In fact, there are Ek Ratna, I showed you, Panch Ratna, Navratna also I've showed you. Then Trayodash Ratna, 13 pinnacles are there. then Saptadash, 17, or Ekvinshati, 21, or Panchvinshati, which I just showed you. So all these different kinds of temples, in fact, they exist. So this is the south-facing temple, which houses Anand Moyi on a wooden singhasan inside the sanctum. Yeah. And this is the compound. Here you can, in the center, you can see the main temple is generally, which is Panchvinshati is normally a 3-story temple. And how it is, the first story has 12 of these pinnacles, 3 on each side, which comes to 12. Then second story has 8 pinnacles, 2 on each side. And then third story has 1 pinnacle on each side, so which is 4. And then the central pinnacle. And all these, in fact, they are almost like a Rekha Deol, I would say, the turreted one. Okay. So like other temples, this temple has also these triple arched entrance here. And we have noticed a lot of terracotta work also. So this compound also houses some of the other Dwadash temples. In fact, there are 12 other temples which are there, out of which 10 are, of course, standard, Artchala, 8-roofed, right? While 2 are Pancharatna type. One of the 5 pinnacled temples houses Lord Ganesh also inside, and the rest are dedicated to Lord Shiva. In fact, all the temples are on a raised platform, which we can see here. And they share the platform also, like on the same platform they are there. And there is this small flight of stairs that is leading you to this platform. So these engraved arches, again, I want you to notice here. No, they keep the repeated appearance they have in these Bengal temples. Innovation of Islamic arch here. These are some of the terracotta panels, the different kinds of deities you can see here on their respective vahanas. So this is a temple facade with, in terracotta with human and terracotta figures. Bardwan. Okay. So this I have tried to sum up the Bengal temple, and now we will quickly look at some of the Assam temples. So we are looking at the very, very popular Kamakhya temple, Kamakhya Devi temple, also known as the oldest Shakti Pita, built around the 8th and 9th century. The temple stands on the Nilachal hill, Assam, Guwahati, in the capital of Assam, in fact. So many other temple complexes around the Kamakhya temple, all dedicated to the 10 Mahavidyas of Shaktism, such as Kali, Tara, Shodashi, Bhuvaneshwari, Dhumavati, Baglamukhi, Matangi, etc., etc. So out of these 10, only 3 of these Mahavidyas reside inside the temple complex, whereas the other 7 have their own individual temples outside. Okay. So the temple, in fact, became, it was a place for tantric culture to flourish. The temple became an important seat for the practice of tantric sacrifices, mysticism, and sorcery. So it was also around this time, around the 10th century, when Kalika Puran was composed. So the first epigraphic evidence of Kamakhya is found in the 9th century Tezpur plate, all right, and which talks about of the Malech dynasty of Varnadeva. Since the archaeological evidence also points to massive 8th, 9th century temple, it could be safely assumed that the earliest temple was constructed during the Malech dynasty. So although the temple has been built a number of times, it exhibits construction of later phases now, the latest being the Kuch dynasty, rebuilding the temple from the ruins. So they reconstructed the temple using the bricks masonry over the ruins of the actual stone temple, which was there originally. So in this phase, the stone components were kind of refitted and reused wherever it was required, and the rest were left in the temple complex. And still the ruins can be found in the temple complex. So the king Nar Narayan, who is responsible for the conservation of the temple, installed an inscription in the Jagmohan of the temple after the reconstruction and restoration in 1565 CE. Okay. So since the beginning of the 17th century, the state of Assam has been under the Ahom kingdom, okay, rulers who established themselves in this place. So thus making the history of Assam enter into a new phase at this time. So the very wide popularity of Kamakhya temple, the Ahom king Pratap Singh introduced Durga Puja in the temple premises using earthen images, which were made by bringing the artisans from Bengal and Orissa to this region. So with the beginning of British colonial rule in the area, the history of Kamakhya, in fact, also went into oblivion, and nature seemed very cruel and harsh towards the temple. The great earthquake that I have been talking about of 1897 mutilated, in fact, all the domes of the temple complex except for the main temple. It was the generosity of the Shakti worshipper, one Maharaj Rameshwar Prasad Singha, the Zamidar of Darbhanga, in fact, who was instrumental in renovating the temple once again. So all the same, Kamakhya in its walls and complex has traces of all the dynasties that had their share, or they ruled over Assam in medieval period, and they have their share in reconstruction of this particular temple. So different dynasties that ruled the place have left a mark upon the walls of this temple, which makes the Kamakhya temple very, very unique and a remarkable place of worship, I would say that. Let's quickly look at the structure, the ground plan. Just like any other temple, entrance to the Kamakhya is from the east. The floor plan of the temple is divided into 4 parts. The temple consists of 3 mandapas and the garbhagriha. The 3 mandapas are called the Nat Mandap, Pancharatna, and the Chalanta. Chalanta is nothing but, these are the terms in the local Ahom language. Okay. So the Nat Mandapa has 4 pillars. You can clearly see, I hope by now we can all read the ground plan. So you can see these 4 pillars here, and which exits itself into Pancharatna here. This is the Pancharatna here, which exits itself into the Chalanta here. Okay. So there is an opening in the Chalanta here. You can see clearly. Okay, which is considered as an entrance and as an exit also. So Chalanta is exited with the steps here, and which through which you can enter the garbhagriha inside. So the stairs are very, very steep, and the garbhagriha is very dark and dingy inside. So so this is the construction of the temple, I would say that. So in fact, the inside walls, they bear inscription of Rajeshwar Singha and Gaurinath Singha of 1780 or 1782 somewhere, which indicate when the structure was rebuilt, right, during Ahom style, in the Ahom style. The temple is Pancharatha with projection on all 3 sides of the garbhagriha, right? Here. Now we are all very, very conversant with these terms. Okay, so another point that is really worthy of mention here is that the domes over each chamber carry distinctive architectural feature, conspicuously different from one another, some of which are repeated over the construction of many temples that were made in different areas, and the others, of course, imitating from the earlier temple architecture which was present. Okay. So the architectural development of Kamakhya temple seems to have changed with the change in the dynasties that I've spoken about earlier. So the first, of course, ruling dynasty was the Varmans, who ruled in the middle of 7th century, followed by Salstambhas. Then came the Palas, ruled in between the 12th century. After the fall of the Palas, many minor kings who were mostly tribal, they ruled the region. Then there was a lot of, political disharmony in the region. And the diversity of the stone ruins in the temple complex, and on the sides of the Nilachal hill, that's where the temple is. In fact, is it kind of has led to the, of course, we all believe that different people have worked on this design and on the temple, and it also talks about the destruction of the temple because so much of debris and ruined, structures are found on this particular hill. Okay. So it is believed that, of course, the temple was destroyed during the Hussein Shah's invasion. So there not only natural calamity was there, but there were a lot of these iconoclastic, invasions were also there of the Kamat kingdom, or Vishwasingha, the founder of Kush dynasty, in fact, who revived the temple, later discovered the ruins of the temple. It was during the time of Nar Narayan, in fact, that the temple was fully reconstructed to its, earlier glory. And the reconstruction was used from the material from the original temple. Okay. In fact, after two failed attempts at restoring the stone shikhar, which was there, Megh Mukdam, a Kutch artisan, decided to take recourse to brick masonry and created the current dome, which is present today. So made by artisans and architects more familiar with Islamic architecture, I keep on telling you this, of Bengal, the dome in fact became bulbous and hemispherical, right? We don't find this kind of a domical structure on a temple, shikhar anywhere else, right? So this definitely is an Islamic influence that we have, which was ringed by these minarets. These shringas or the minor shikhars have also taken on the form of those minarets that we have on Islamic monuments, the ang shikhars that we have on Indian temples. So in the Kalika Puran, it is mentioned that Pragyajyotishpur, or the ancient capital of the kingdom of Kamarupa, all right, that's the old name of this, was in the middle of a kingdom where Kamakhya Devi dwelt. Okay. And the said Puran also mentions that before the invasion of Prince Narak from the kingdom of Videha in the North India, Ghatak, Kirat is nothing but a hunter, all right. It is, he ruled this area. So from the lifestyle depicted in the Kalika Puran and the Yogini Tantra about the Kirats, it is clear that they were the worshippers of Yoni, or the female genitals, which was named as Devi Kamakhya in the later period. Okay. So here we can see the three elements very clearly. The main temple here, the Garbhagriha with these minor shikhas. So they are actually not they are not part of the main shikhar like we saw in the earlier temples. They are pretty much separated like the Islamic architecture in the form of the minarets that we have here. This is the Chalanta, the superstructure of the Chalanta. And this is, of course, the Pancharatna, which has five, these domical roofs, four in the four corners, and the central one is slightly bigger than the other four. Okay. So besides being a very religious, highly religious and tantric center, it also exhibits remarkable sculptural art. Okay. And one can easily see the influence or the features of Gupta art in the sculptures of Kamakhya temple, for that matter. Okay. And the sculptures of Assam also are very much closely related to that of Bengal and Orissa, mostly adorned with the interior as well as all the exterior walls of the temple. All right. The doorways of the temple, the loose sculptures which are lying in the complex, they all attest to this particular fact that there is a definite influence from the Gupta period here. In fact, there's a total absence of Dwarpalas in this particular temple. Probably earlier there might have been, but as of today, they are totally devoid of any kind of Dwarpalas. Because of probably the reconstruction of the temple innumerable times, it would not be wrong to entirely suggest that there must have been Dwarpalas in the earlier times, but not now. So these are the walls of the temples, which are very, very nicely decorated. Here you have some kind of musicians here. And then there is this frieze of floral band, which you have rosettes here. And you have Surya divinity here. You can clearly make out the two lotus stems that he's holding, wearing boots. Yeah. Okay, there are a lot of Bhairav sculptures here on the outer wall. This being a Shakti Pitha, Bhairav, of course, is the presiding deity here. And in fact, I have shown you inside the Chausat Yogini temple also, the central shrine inside that, horseshoe shaped structure. It is the sculpture of Bhairav inside. Okay. So the other sculptures are that of course, Surya, Ganesh, Daksha, etc., etc. This is a very interesting sculpture in the corner of the sanctum's outer wall, that of Veenadhar Dakshin Murti. Dakshin Murti is, of course, very, very Saumya, benign aspect of Shiva, being a great master of dance and music. This form of Shiva is seen holding a veena in his hands here. And of course, he's wearing a mundamal here. You can clearly see here. And this one hand, he's having a ladle, with what you offer, give offering to the fire in when you are performing a home or a yajna. Yeah. Okay. So along with the male figures, there are considerable number of female figures also that are carved on the temple. The female figures, of course, include Uma, Gauri, Kali, etc. So the nature is a symbolic representation of woman which has creative power. So in the sculptural representation, Gauri is seen standing in a very, very graceful posture, holding a half-blown lotus in right hand, while the other hand here, you can see the Katyavalambit. Her hand is resting on her waist here, on the kati here. The very sensual portrayal, I would say, of the women represent the classical Gupta style here. Okay. The Kalika Puran, in fact, in the chapter on Daksha Yajna, talks about the story how various Shakti Pithas were established. Once Daksh, the father of Sati, organized a yajna, and in which Sati and Shiva were not invited. Sati reached her father's place only to be insulted by him, and abuses were thrown at Shiva also. Listening to all this, Sati jumps into the fire, and of course, Shiva becomes knowing about, when Shiva comes to know, he gets very, very furious listening to all this, and he lifts the body of Parvati in his, and starts to perform Tandav, all right, of the dance of destruction. And of course, all the devas reach Vishnu that we have to save the whole world because of this. So Vishnu with his, Sudarshan Chakra cuts the body of Sati in 51 parts, which fall on the ground at different places. And the yoni, and which actually, these are the places where all the 51 Shakti Pithas are there. And the yoni of the goddess falls where the Kamakhya temple is. All right. So it is the yoni which is being worshipped here. So this I'm showing you the Garbhagriha image inside. There is no image inside or no icon here. Just a natural rock is there in the form of a yoni, which is at all times it is kept moist by the water which comes from a natural spring nearby. Okay. So this is what is worshipped here. Okay. So this is another sculpture on the wall. Woman is regarded in the form of mother goddess. Since the temple is dedicated to Shakti worship, there is a considerable number of female figurines in the temple. A unique representation of a female in a meditative pose is seen carved on one of the walls here. So another interesting portrayal that you see openly exposing her genitals here and blood spurting out, known as the Matrika, is seen carved on one of the walls. In fact, the doors of the temple are also closed when the deity is undergoing menstrual cycle, and the festival is there is a festival dedicated to this phenomenon. In this sense, I think it's very important for us to know that Hindu religion, or the Brahminic religion that we are talking about, is celebration of life. And it is not celebration of just few things, but every aspect of life, not, shunning life as such. Okay. It is unlike the other world religions like say, Islam or Christianity, where there is a fear of the supreme power, or you are constantly under watch from him, or, any kind of pleasure is kind of prohibited, in these religions. But I feel in that sense, Hindu religion kind of, it celebrates each and every aspect of life, whether it is Kama, Dharma, Arth, Moksha, every aspect of life, it is considered to be important, right? This is another beautiful sculpture we see on the Dashbhuja Kali, a form of Mahishasur with 10 arms, an amalgamation of the attributes of these two different goddesses into one. This distinct sculpture, in fact, is carved on the inner wall of the Chalanta. Then these are some more sculptures that we have here. Very beautiful sculpture of Vishnu with all his 4 attributes here. Ganesh is there on this wall here. Very, very beautiful. Okay, quickly, we can just look at this one temple. It's not even a temple, it's the ruin of an old temple, Daparbatiya, a small village very close to West Tezpur. So, in fact, there's a brick temple here, and it was during the earthquake that the old ruins of the temple came to the surface. And in fact, this particular, it's only the door frame, and there is this pit here, which probably older. There must have been a shivling here, which this is not the original shivling, of course. So on the Lalat Bimb, we have the image of Lakulisha, which kind of points to the adherence or the dedication of this temple to Shiva. All right. Then there are these Ganga Yamuna figures at the bottom, and all the different decorations that we have here, they point to this particular fact here. The vertical bands, the figures of Ganga and Yamuna. So it is said that probably the original temple was built during the Gupta period. And it is also important for us to learn that the sway of Gupta, influence was reaching right up till Assam in those days. These are some of the sculptures we find. The Chandrashalas on the Lalat Bimb here. And this is the figure of Lakulish that we have on the Lalat Bimb. Then, of course, no discussion of Assam is complete till we have spoken about the Satras, the Assamese Satras, the Vaishnavite monasteries set up initially by Shankar Dev in Majuli Island. Majuli Island is, of course, I think every tourist wants to visit this place. These Satras are the Vaishnavite monasteries, just like how we have Buddhist monasteries, Jain monasteries. Likewise, that's where the monks live and they pray and meditate, etc. So Majuli is a river island. I'm sure some of you already know about this in the Brahmaputra river. And it is said to be receding and soon will disappear in future due to the flooding of the river. All right. So at this time, in fact, converting the major Shakta scholar, Mahadev Deva, and convincing the Ahom king about the Vaishnav religion, that's how these Satras came into being. Then, of course, it spread to the other parts of the Kamrupa, etc. So the different parts of the Satra, I would say just quickly, of course, Karapat, Namgar or Kirtanghar, Manukut and Hathi, and the Satradhars or Mahanta's residence. Each Satra has usually 4 Karaput, gateways. Karaputs are gateways mainly, and in the midst stands the Namgar or the Kirtanghar, the main prayer hall. and adjoining it is the Mankut, or a small building in which is placed the Singhasana, a wooden throne which stands on 4 carved lions, or thapna. Sthapna, that's the uh, colloquial word for that, or the altar, which contains the main object of worship. And what is the main object of worship? It is usually a copy of Bhagavad Puran in manuscript form. Okay. In fact, in passage of time, some satras have also begun to, lose the rigor of, the how it started against idolation, no, idolatry worship. And as a consequence, some of them have also started establishing, especially the Brahmin leaders in this particular sect, they started placing images of Krishna. Of course, we all know an avatar of Vishnu. Okay. So around the Sthapna or the Thapna, there are many sacred objects. We have earthen lamps, incenses are also burnt before it. The Hathis, in fact, or Hathis, a group of huts placed on the 4 quarters of the compound where the monks live in their own cell, like how we have the Buddhist cells. If you've been to Ajanta or any of these Buddhist caves, there is something very, very, gracious and pleasing in this whole atmosphere of the place, which are called the Assamese satras. And in fact, there are very many of these satras in different parts of Assam. I think with this, I'm going to conclude. And yes, I'll stop share. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Have I lost you? Hello? I thought this was a very important part of the entire series, because very, very few people talk about the temples from Bengal and Assam, whereas they have been the thriving religious centers of India, ancient centers. Yeah. Okay. Have we lost somebody here? I can't hear anyone. Yeah.
मैम we are all here.
Okay. Okay.
संभालते हैं, मतलब
Okay.
फाइल वगैरह सब कुछ रखते हैं, देखते हैं,
Right. Right. Right.
बुला के सबके सामने वहाँ पे डांट दे दिया।
1 मिनट रुक गया।
Okay.
वो हो गया ना? नहीं। हेलो।
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
हाँ मैम, हो गया आपका व्याख्यान पूरा?
जी सर।
चलिए, आपके लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद दे रहा हूँ। और हम लोग आपके क्वेश्चन, आप चाहें तो, नहीं तो लास्ट दिन भी हम लोग आपका एक
ठीक है।
कंक्लूजन।
हाँ, one session we have where we only are going to have question answer sessions. Not only question answers, any impressions you want to share, your thoughts, everything. Yeah, we will have that. Yeah.
और वो जो भी अपने क्वेश्चन होंगे वो हम लोगों के पास दे देंगे, हम लोग उनको समाहित करेंगे।
Definitely. Yeah.
फिर से हम मैम के प्रति बहुत बहुत कृतज्ञता ज्ञापित करते हैं कि ऐसी जगह जहाँ पर बहुत दुर्लभ होता है लोगों का जाना, और उनके मंदिर के बारे में हमको पूरा ज्ञान करा दिया जाता है। और अगला जो हमारा सेशन होगा वो बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण होगा, क्योंकि हम लोग जो चालुक्य पीरियड के जो रॉक्स और स्ट्रक्चर, टेम्पल स्ट्रक्चर है, उस पर हम लोग ध्यान।
Yes. So now we will move downwards. Yeah, we've almost completed all of northern India, central India, eastern India, western India, and now we are going to move downwards.
इसी तरह से जोड़ते रहें।
Yeah.
और इसी तरह से कार्यक्रम को सफल बनाएं। और हम अपने फिर से मैडम के प्रति बहुत बहुत कृतज्ञता ज्ञापित करते हैं। साथ ही हमारे जो पुण्यार्जक परिवार हैं, श्री राजकुमार जी का परिवार, श्री निर्मल भोगीलाल जी मुंबई वाले, श्री धनेश जी की स्मृति में उनका परिवार, एवं मातु श्री राजकुमारी जी के परिवार के प्रति भी कृतज्ञता ज्ञापित करते हैं कि इस तरह के कार्यक्रम के आयोजन करने में उन्होंने आर्थिक सहयोग हम लोगों को प्रदान किया है। इसी शब्दों के साथ में सभी का धन्यवाद। जय हिंद।
Thank you everybody, and I will see you coming Wednesday.